The manga spoiler industry and quote-unquote business is rather fascinating. I have been in this industry both as a fan, a reader, and someone that makes videos for quite some time now. I have seen and navigated through spoilers throughout my entire journey on this platform, throughout my entire journey of reading manga. If you are reading manga in some way, shape, or form, you will come across spoilers. Now, let it be known that the spoiler culture that is surrounding manga is incredibly illegal. It also makes a ton of money. Like, it's a illegal business that is probably within the multi-millions at this point, where the taking, trading, and selling of spoilers has become such a lucrative business on a global front. However, over the years, that has changed. Both the reception towards spoilers, the quote-unquote business that surrounds it, its overall operation and impact. I have seen it firsthand, and I think we have a very interesting and hopeful future for spoilers surrounding manga. If you do not know how spoilers work, let me give you some context. The spoiler industry and or its business is a lucrative one. It is incredibly successful. Of course, it is highly illegal. From my understanding, spoilers have always been accompanied with the physical magazine, and it's because you can physically get that magazine early. So let me break it down. Weekly Shonen Jump is one of, if not the most popular manga magazines on this earth. It publishes some of, if not the greatest stories of all time within this industry. It is a physical magazine, meaning you can buy it every single week. You go into a store Monday morning within Japan and you'll be able to read the newest of Weekly Shonen Jump chapters. Pretty great, right? Before digital kind of emerged into the scene, this was the only way to read the chapters. So how do they get it? There is a ton of ways, and it would entirely depend on what production order and what connections you may or may not have. Let's start at the earliest conception of spoilers. There was a time where perhaps people in the office of Weekly Shonen Jump, people directly connected to these stories, to the editors, to the chief, where they could perhaps be bought off. Doing this, they wouldn't actually provide you with images, but more so descriptions of the work itself. So in a lot of instances, you would get chapters with just brief descriptions of what it's about. I would say that is not an often occurrence. Having an inside man within the company is kind of ridiculous nowadays, but not impossible. Instead, where it started to become more lucrative is people obviously outside of the office. What you need to understand about Jump magazines is that they don't physically sell it out of the office. They sell it to a litany and a variety of stores every single week. That is where your vulnerabilities are going to come in, because you have to physically ship those magazines to those stores. And you can't curate every single person that comes in contact with it. People loading the magazines, the people driving the magazines, the people unloading the magazines into the store, the people that have the magazine over the weekend that work at the store. There's just too many people to try and keep it all a secret and to not sell spoilers online. All you'd have to do perhaps is to get in contact with one of these in-betweeners. These are just your everyday working people. And if you were to offer them money to take some pictures of a couple of pages within a magazine, why not? Right? Maybe they don't even know the intention of what they're actually doing. When you see authors talking about them drawing the manga, it's not when we are reading it. They don't spend 7 days drawing the chapter from Sunday or Monday to the next Sunday or Monday when the chapter releases. It's usually 4 to 5 days prior, around about Tuesday or Wednesday. That is their week to week. So they go from Tuesday to Wednesday to next Tuesday or Wednesday, and that is their week of drawing the chapter, and then they'll start the next one. This is obviously just for physical, because that Tuesday to Friday is the printing period. Jump has to approve the chapter, photocopy the chapter, print all of the hundreds of thousands of volumes of that week's magazine, and have it pushed out to companies and businesses before the weekend is over, usually on a Thursday or Friday. So those stores can stock their shelves Friday if they're closed over the weekend, or they can stock them over the weekend so it releases on Monday. Now, this has probably changed a multitude of different times over the years, but a lot of their, biggest issues is tracking that physical magazine. So it goes back to those in-betweeners, the middlemen. You can't track them, nor can you control them. The simplest thing that they were doing is that the drivers were just selling some of the magazines off the back of the truck, and that echoed and created a multi-million-dollar franchise franchise that spanned out of Japan to China and Korea to the West, etc., etc. It just spiraled out of control. So that is the loose process of spoilers, but there has been different types of spoilers over the years. Before there was even images or rough artwork, there was literally just lines of Japanese. That's it. It was untranslated and people would have to do the translation themselves. Very vague description what this chapter or even this page was about. It was never coherent or even really in order. It was kind of just like a bunch of different things that was quickly scribbled down. Next, you would get these really rough pictures that were not clean or not photocopied or anything like that, just straight pictures off a phone that you could barely make out half the time, maybe with a bit of a description as well. That would move on to full pictures, so a bit more clarity off the phone. From there, you'd go to like full photocopying, still not translated, but when you started to get the full chapter in at least somewhat decent quality, there have been groups that would go out of their way to translate it to multiple different languages. Back in the day, right, that was kind of the only way that you could read manga. They didn't have any like official translation team to the West, couldn't read it in other languages. There was no like digital site for it. It was kind of just, if you knew about manga and you knew about Naruto or One Piece or Bleach, kind of had to find your own way to read it because they had nothing to read it on. Of course, all of that has changed. We're in a much more accessible time for manga now, yet spoilers still persist, and instead have taken a life form of their own. This is Gege Akutami. He is the author of Jujutsu Kaisen. Akutami is a brilliant author, and with the success of Jujutsu Kaisen being so incredibly global, of course, spoilers were going to be rampant, but it was kind of different. Spoilers tend to always happen with stories as something that you can really control. The more a story gets popular, the more people want to spoil it or start to read spoilers. However, there's no real benefit to doing so. If you're reading spoilers, you're not getting the chapter early because you're going to read the spoilers at the exact same time 7 days later. Sure, you have bragging rights that you read the chapter earlier than other people, but that's kind of a lame excuse to read it. Maybe back in the day, if you couldn't afford the chapters or didn't have a place to read it or it wasn't translated in your language, that's a bit more understandable, of course. But within recent years, translation is widespread, day of as well. So the same time that Japan gets it, a lot of other languages get it as well. You can also read it for free, and up to 3 of the most recent chapters for free, and there's a lot of different official sites that you can read it on. So because of that, spoilers start to become pretty insignificant. However, Jujutsu Kaisen and Akutami accidentally created a culture of spoilers that was arguably the worst I have ever seen. Some of the most detrimental, some of the most community breaking spoilers I've seen for a story in my entire lifetime of reading and talking about manga. I thought One Piece had really bad spoilers, which it does over the years, maybe even the big 3, maybe even stuff like Tokyo Ghoul or Attack on Titan, but easily, hands down, Jujutsu Kaisen has the worst spoilers. The popularity for the series was through the roof, and there was really no way to control spoilers. Even though you could read chapters for free same day as Japan, translated in multiple different languages, people still wanted those spoilers, and it became so consistent that there was more people reading and talking about the spoilers 2, 3, sometimes even 4 days before the official release, that it completely killed the momentum of the official release. So everyone would talk about the spoilers and have their conversations as you do every single week, and then when the official chapter rolled around, dead silence. Barely any people would talk about it. And a lot of this was very much perpetuated by people looking to earn money. So of course you have a bunch of YouTube accounts and Twitter accounts and people artificially benefiting both in followers and money for releasing these spoilers. And they too are just middlemen. They're just buying the spoilers from someone else so they can spread it to other people before other spoiler people or groups. Like the Kaisen community with spreading spoilers was so rampant, volatile, and kind of egotistically fueled that arguably it broke the entire reading experience. I've seen spoilers from the story in places that I didn't think I could see spoilers back in the day. There was nothing you could do about it. At that point, you may as well get off the internet as a whole to not get spoiled on Kaisen. So it really felt like for you not to get spoiled, you almost had to kind of read the spoilers yourself, and I guarantee that's kind of the circular foundation of it. If you create a community that thrives off spoilers, the only way that you can't be spoiled by joining that community and perpetuating the problem even further. It didn't help that there was people trying to ego swing how early they could get spoilers with each other, really just to be the grubbiest of the lot, which I found rather cute. However, because of that horrible experience, it unironically gave us something good. When new series start to become popular, the community do not want to see it go down Jujutsu Kaisen's route. So they will actively try and protect the series as much as possible. And that is the wildest, most honorable, most impressive thing I've seen in all of my years of reading manga and seeing how spoilers have evolved. Not once can I remember that this has happened before on this scale. And it's all because of Kaisen being a blessing and a curse. Because its community of spoilers was so bad, so horrible for everybody else, new stories want to actively avoid that same fate. Kagurabachi started it. It is getting more and more popular, and of course there is obviously going to be spoilers. However, people are constantly pushing back on it. They don't want to see it on the timeline. They don't want to see it getting traction. They don't want to see it be celebrated and talked about prior to the official release. You might think, oh, that won't even do anything, but surprisingly, it's stopped a lot, and it's doing a lot, and it's really reinforcing a tight-knit community that share the same feelings towards their story getting spoilers. They don't want it, and they don't want to see it. Because of that, other stories are also following in its footsteps. Ichi the Witch, for example, is becoming incredibly popular, so spoilers are naturally popping up, and their community is working in unison with Kagurabachi to stop spoilers as well. This might sound like nothing, this might mean nothing to you, but I can't tell you a time where I have ever seen this happen before. That people don't want to see spoilers. That because it's so easily accessible to read these chapters free of charge in multiple different languages, the same time as Japan, there's no point for spoilers. And they've seen the worst of it only a year or two prior. It's not only exciting, but also kind of revolutionary for the manga industry. Something that I think a lot of you should be proud of and impressed with for pulling off and accomplishing. It has bolstered the community in a really beautiful way, and honestly just makes the story as a whole more enticing to read. I imagine new readers for Kagura and Ichi see how connected the community is with pushing back against spoilers, and that feels welcoming. Now I want to go read that story, or read this story, or read another story. My only hope is that it lasts for as long as possible. These are early stories that are gaining a lot of popularity and traction, but when an anime comes around, when they blow up in popularity once again, it might get to a size that is uncontrollable. At the end of the day, this isn't me sitting here saying how you should read your story or to stop doing this and start doing this, blah blah blah. You're old enough. What I can recommend is go read the official stuff. It's super easy, it's super simple, it's completely free, and it's in a multitude of different languages. At the same time, you get to be a part of the community alongside everybody else, rather than being fragmented in these little pockets of spoilers. Just imagine what the end of Kaisen could have looked like if there was no spoilers. Twitter was already breaking with them, so everyone reacting to it at the exact same time. It's sad to think about, but it would have been genuinely insane.